In this video, we are going to begin construction of our admin news page.
Okay.
We're going to start with that blank admin template we created in a previous lesson, and we're going to start setting that up so that it will provide us with our news administrative interface.
Okay.
Now here's the way that we want these to work.
Okay.
We want to set up the admin screens so that we have one physical PHP file per admin page. And inside this PHP file, it will be set up so that it can display in several different ways.
I see.
We want it set up so that when you first go to it, you're simply provided with a single link that will take you to a form instead of putting the form available immediately. Since, again, this page is going to have multiple functions. It's going to need to show us all available news items, allow us to add news items, and allow us to edit existing news items.
I see. So what you're saying is that we're going to take everything we learned in the past few lessons, and we're going to apply that all practically to an actual web page itself, so we can update the website, maintain it, and so on and so forth.
Right, everything covered so far is going to start to be brought together within this admin system.
Okay, that's cool.
So let's get started. Let's take the admin template page, load it into GoLive, and we'll do a save as so that we can save this to the name of our actual admin PHP script. So let's say admin _ news.php. Now, let's get started with the first link. Like we were saying before, we want to have an add news item link that, when clicked, will reload this admin page and provide us with the form.
Okay, that's what you're saying. So you want the same page to pop up. You don't want another page.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is going to simply say something like add news item. And we're going to make this entire thing into a link. And now, where do we want this to go? Well, like we were saying, it goes to this exact same page.
Right.
Which means we could hard code in admin _ news.php.
Right.
But we're going to do something that would make it a little bit more dynamic, meaning if we were to change the name of the script, everything would automatically update with it.
Okay.
To do that, we're going to jump into source, and for the link, we're going to add a little bit of PHP. If you remember from the Git lesson, we had talked about predefined variables. One of the ones we showed was PHP self, a variable which contained the value of what our current script's name was.
Okay.
So we can use that here, so that way we can have a name that will follow this name instead of one that's hard-coded.
Right, right.
So to do that, I'm going to simply open up a PHP tag, and I'm going to use the shorthand where we have $equals. That way we're simply outputting an expression. And kill that off. You'll notice that sometimes GoLive is a little bit less friendly to this type of tag.
Right.
You saw just a second ago when we opened it and closed it, it threw in an extra end link tag. Just something to be aware of and to be careful of in case it does that. You need to erase that back out, otherwise it'll mess up the HTML code.
I see, okay.
So inside of this, we're going to put $_server, and then specify PHP self for the specific key of that array. So we have add news item. Also, I'm going to space this out a little bit so that we can see what we're doing inside of this cell. Something that will become important a little later when we have more complex code here.
Okay.
Now I'm going to save this out, and let's take a look at what this is actually doing. Let's load up this admin script in our web browser. So admin _ news.php. And here we go.
Look at that.
A link with add news item. And if we look down in the status bar, we can see that it is in fact saying admin news. This means that the PHP code here was evaluated, and it spat out the value for server PHP self.
I see. And of course, if you click on it, it's not going to be going anywhere.
Right. If we were to click on it, this is where we're at now. So sure, we can click on it, and it works, but we're still just here.
Right. It's doing what you told it to do. It's going back to the same page.
Right. Now we need to be able to tell our page that we wish to add an item. We're going to do that by passing some information via the get method.
Okay.
To do that, just like in the get lesson, after the link itself, we'll add a question mark, and then specify what we want to say. We'll say add = 1. This means we'll have to set up our script to check for the value add, and if it exists, put the entire script into, or the admin script into add mode.
Okay.
So, we have that. Let's save and make sure that we have this working. And you can see down in the bottom it does say add = 1.
Add = 1.
Now, we need to start doing some checks. And once again, we can gain access to this add variable inside the predefined array $_get.
Okay.
So we need to check and see if that specific key has been set. So we'll open up a PHP tag, close it before this because we still want to have this output as HTML. So inside of here, we're going to start an if block. We're going to say if is set $_get and the key add. So if that is set, and then closing parenthesis for the if statement itself, we'll open up a curly brace.
Right.
And immediately close out of the tag here. Because when we create our HTML form, we're going to have it outside of PHP tags. That way we take advantage of it being parsed as HTML code instead of PHP.
I gotcha.
So in HTML, let's leave ourselves a comment saying place form here. Just for later so we can get our bearings once we've finished off the link part. So now we'll reopen the PHP tag. And we'll say closing brace. And you saw just a second ago it flashed to show that this brace matches this one.
Right.
So it is tracking across these PHP tags. Like we showed in the advanced PHP tag usage lesson, we can break into and out of a PHP tag in the middle of an if statement.
Okay.
So that's all we're doing here. Is now we're finishing off this if statement. Then I'm going to add an else to it and close the PHP tag once again. Because what we're setting up for is if we are supposed to be adding an item, then place the add form. Otherwise, simply display the add link.
Okay.
So we'll open up a final PHP tag. Now, why do we need this last PHP tag? Well, we have the else opening up a less than curly brace, and if we don't close that, that will cause a parse error inside of PHP.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
if we close this, we can see that, yes, we are closing this one. And I'm actually going to leave a comment, because otherwise we'll have this one floating curly brace inside of PHP tag by itself.
It'll be confusing later on down the road.
So I'm going to say end main if.
Okay.
So from this now, let us take a look and see if this is working. See if we have any errors or not. So go back to this page and no errors yet. If we click on add news item, the link goes away.
The link goes away.
Which is actually what we want in this case. Because if we click on the link, we see we have nothing except for an HTML comment.
Right, so it's telling you that, yes, I am replacing it, but you haven't told me what to replace it with.
Exactly. And if we were to do a view source on this code, we can probably scroll in and find our comment. And there it is.
There it is.
So, with that now, we're ready to start taking a look at building our HTML form. Now, another thing to point out is we're going the extra distance to open and close these PHP tags so that we leave the HTML alone. Another advantage it gives us is if we go back into layout within GoLive, we can actually see the various items in between the PHP tags.
Oh, I see.
Inside of GoLive, it's going to place anything within script tags in a little script box because it doesn't internally render them. It's just basically if you start scripting within GoLive, it basically says that the scripting's up to you, but here's where your script tags were.
Okay.
So, and it even has our little comment placed in between here. So that's where the form goes. So we can actually delete that comment, and I'm going to add a new line to make it a little easier to work with. We'll clean the HTML up in just a minute.
Okay.
So now we need to begin construction of a form. So from the Forms tab, that is, if you are on Basic, just switch over to Forms.
Okay.
We'll drag a form in right here, and there we go. The HTML form is simply used as a way of grouping together various inputs.
Right.
So that all the inputs can be directed at a certain target. That target is specified by your action. And also we can specify things like what method to use. If you remember from the post lesson, we had created a temporary or a little test form and we'd use the post method. So, as a matter of fact, that's the first thing we can change. We can go to the method and change this to post.
Okay.
The next thing we're going to need to change is the action. When you submit a form, it tells the browser to take all the information and puts together a request for whatever page was within the action. Meaning if you specify the action to be some other PHP script, when you submit, it's going to take all this information and send it to that PHP script.
I see.
Now, in our case, we want to take this information and submit it to ourselves, to admin news.
Right.
And now we can do the same trick that we did with the link, where we took the link and added in some PHP code. We can do the same thing for the action of our form. Another interesting thing is, so up until now we've always typed PHP code in the source tab.
Right.
In certain cases where we want to replace a value with a piece of PHP code, it is possible to simply type it directly into the inspector.
Oh,
Let's take a look at doing that. So we'll use our shorthand PHP tags, which will allow us to simply output an expression. And of course the expression is going to be $server PHP self, like such. Now, what did this do? If we go into source and look at our form now, you can see that the action is in fact that piece of PHP code.
Oh, look at that. Okay, cool.
So it works without a problem.
It just seems to be like a fairly quicker way instead of having to go into the source.
That is true. That way it saves us from going back and forth between source so often.
Because if you're constantly, like if you need to add more stuff onto the actual the page right there, you can just start doing it up there in the action section. So you can, do it and then go back over, grab another one, and so on and so forth.
Right. Okay. Now, we have the form itself defined. Now we need to start placing various inputs into that form. Give ourselves text fields and checkboxes and so on.
I gotcha.
Now, to visually lay these out, I'm going to use an HTML table.
Okay.
So I'll go back to basic, and I'll drag a table into the form. And the reason I'm putting it in the form is that keeps things a bit cleaner in the source, because we do need the tags to go all the way around this. If we put inputs inside these cells, we need to make sure that all the inputs stay within our main form.
Okay, I gotcha.
Now, let's edit some of the properties of this table. For this case, we're going to create a table that is 2 columns wide by 5 columns tall. And we're going to take the border and set that to 0. We're going to give ourselves a cell padding of 3 and a cell spacing of 1. And I'm going to specify the color black, which I believe it is set to already.
Okay.
So that's good. So we have the table black. The idea here is that I want a table with a thin 1 pixel black border around all the cells.
Oh, I see.
So in order to, that gives us black. Now, in order to make all the cells white, I'll simply drag over all of them, specify a color, and we'll set that to color to white, which it is currently set
default.
to. And there we go.
And look at that.
So, this is going to be the table that will let us organize our input fields. So, let's start adding some of the text to this. The first one is going to be the news header.
Okay.
Second one is going to be the news headline. The third is simply going to be the news text field. And the final two are, one of them is going to be for the checkboxes and one for the submit.
Okay.
We're going to leave all that for the cells themselves.
Okay.
For the news header, we need a simple text field input.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back to forms. And you can see over on the left here we have text field.
Right.
So I'm simply going to drag one of those into place.
And look at that, slaps it down.
And now, let's set a few more properties for the table itself. I want to lock the width of this table.
Alright, you don't want it all scrunched down like that.
Right, so we'll go to the table, set its width to 500 pixels across.
Ah, there we go.
And I want these cells to have a width of 150 pixels.
Okay.
So that should clean things up.
Alright.
Now, one last thing I do is I want our text fields to automatically fill out the width of their cells.
Okay.
So I'm going to create a quick style, and we'll define a new class. We'll simply call this, we call this text field, like such. And now what I want to do is go over to the block properties and specify a width of 99%. Let's grab %. Change this to 99, and there we go. What this will allow us to do is grab this text field, say that we want to apply this to input itself, so only to the input, not put any type of style around it.
I see.
I'll set that to text field, and let's save it out and see what we've got so far.
Okay.
So we'll save admin news. We'll go back to our page here, and you can see we already have the add equals 1 up in the URL, so if we just hit enter, there's the start of our form. And there's our text field that spans the entire width.
Cool.
So far, so good. Now, since we already have this one set up, I can easily copy and paste it into this cell. Now, news is going to be a little different. We want news to be a multi-line input, or what is known as a text area. So we can go over here and grab a text area, drag it into place like such.
Cool.
Now, its width is wide enough that it's almost pushing the table out a little bit, so I want to bring it in some, maybe down to 20.
Okay.
You notice this is now less than the cell. So instead of trying to battle with exactly how many columns fits this size, I'm simply going to apply our text field style to it.
Okay.
Which should allow it to match the width of the cell. So if we go back and check,
and
there
look
we
at that.
go.
That's perfect.
So that takes care of our news field.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's add some checkboxes for featured and active.
Okay.
Over here we have checkbox, so we'll simply drag one into place for featured and add a little bit of text for it. Space over a little and add a second checkbox. And we'll say this one is for active.
Cool.
So one last thing to round out our form will be the submit button, the actual part of the interface that will let us submit this data.
Okay.
So here we have a submit button. We'll drag it into place. Now I want this aligned to the right of the table just for visual purposes.
Okay.
So with it selected, let's jump over to cell properties, grab the horizontal alignment and set it to right.
Ah, there we go.
And let's see, for the actual text that this displays, I want to specify a label, and we'll just shorten it to submit, like such.
Alrighty.
So that has all the elements in place. Now we need to name these. It is very important that the name, or that we set names for these, because that's the way we'll be able to access their data after it is submitted. So for news header, we'll give that a name of header. News headline will simply be named headline. And news will be called news. The featured box will simply be called featured. The idea here is that the names of these match our table field names.
Right.
It's not a requirement, it's just something that makes it easier to work with once we get into it. We don't have to remember, okay, well, what's the table version of this? Okay, now what's the PHP version of this name? It keeps everything easy to keep track of.
Easy to read.
So,
Active.
we'll name that active. And finally, we will name the submit button, because even the submit button holds a value that we can check on the following page.
Okay.
We're actually going to use that value to tell if this form data has in fact been submitted.
I see, okay.
So I'll simply call this form sub.
Okay.
This value doesn't match anything. It's just something we're going to test later.
Okay, I gotcha.
So with that, we have header, headline, news, featured, active, and form sub.
Okay.
Now one other thing that we need to take a look at is the checkbox's values. A checkbox has a kind of interesting behavior in the way its data is submitted.
Okay.
If it is checked, its value is submitted. If it is unchecked, no part of it is submitted. As a matter of fact, that key in the get array will actually be empty for featured.
Okay, so is it like the true-false value of a boolean, or?
It's more like it is either set and has a value, or it is completely unset.
I see. Okay, all right.
So we'll specify, or we'll give both of these a value of 1.
Okay.
Now this might seem confusing at first. You might think, well, how do we tell the difference between them if they're both 1?
Yeah.
Well, the way this is going to work, in the $post array that we're going to be checking, this checkbox will have a key called featured. And that key will contain the value 1. Active has its own key called active.
I see.
And so there are two separate keys in the get array.
I see, okay.
You can almost think of them as two separate variables. And we don't directly check their value. We check if they're set or not.
I see,
That's what we'll be doing in the next script. So, with this setup, this basically covers our HTML form. Before we end off, let's make sure that everything is looking good.
Yay!
So we have everything set up here. If we were to hit the submit button, it goes here like it's supposed to.
Right.
And it was submitting via the post method, which meant all the get information got cleared, which is why we're back to the beginning.
I see, okay.
So far, everything is in order.
Right.
We have put together an HTML form using a little bit of PHP here and there for filling in values, and more importantly, using PHP to control whether or not we are in add mode versus, I guess you could say, normal mode, where we have the add link.
I gotcha.
So that is going to wrap up this lesson.
Alrighty, cool.